So, hey, everybody, I want to thank you for coming to our Pizza and Politics with the Chino Valley Chamber of Commerce. We do this quarterly, and in this case today, we're talking about a title called Come to Your Census. At this time, I want to introduce our board member, Jim Gallagher, who helps us organize our Pizza and Politics event. Jim is going to give an introduction to our presenter today and our topic, Come to Your Census. Jim, take it away.
All right, thank you. So it's with great pleasure today that I introduce a friend of mine, Cindy Reul from the League of Women Voters. She's the lead on voter services in this district. Her responsibility covers the Supreme Court, federal government. Also every other year she covers local elections and the propositions. My relationship with Cindy goes back to candidate forums and so on. I've probably known her at least 6 years now.
Yep.
I found her to be quite knowledgeable, and when she offered a presentation on the census, I felt that it was of value to the small business community that she come and share that with us. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Cindy, and feel free to share anything else about yourself that you wish, Cindy. Thank you.
Hello, thank you everyone for tuning in. And when you look at your screen, it'll say Tom. However, that is not Tom, it is Cindy. And when you look at Renee, Renee is not me. I am just blank. So you won't be able to see my face. You're just going to hear my lovely voice today. Let me talk to you about how I came to do this. I was asked by our league to find a speaker to do the census, and there were plenty of speakers, but I like to hear myself talk, and I'm a very curious person, so I decided to see what I could do on my own. And when I am asked to do something by our government or by a league or by anyone really, I really like to look into the reasons why I'm doing that. So I started doing research on the census, and because I had a lot of questions on why we do that. So today I hopefully am going to answer some of your why questions, and in the process hopefully teach you some history. And to do all of this, it's actually going to be a lot of numbers. I'm sorry about that, but the census is all about numbers, so you're going to see a lot of numbers, and hopefully you're going to learn a lot of things today. So it's going to be nice today with everything that's been happening the last few weeks to maybe come to our census in a lot of different ways. But I'm primarily going to talk about the census that is coming up April 1st that we do every 10 years. So we're going to get started with a little bit of history. So first of all, the first census was held in 1790. That was 1 year after George Washington became president. The census is mandated by the Constitution, and the census says, quote, representative and direct taxes shall be apportioned among several states which may be included within this union according to their respective number, unquote. Remember, we only had 13 colonies at the time, but the territories of Kentucky, Maine, Vermont, and Tennessee were counted as well because we had westward and northern movement. There were only 6 questions, and it was conducted door to door by U.S. Marshals. The results were actually posted in town squares, and people could actually go and look at those results and make their own amendments to those results. What it did not do, it did not count Native Americans, it did not count indentured servants until 1890, 100 years later. All other people were counted. That means slaves. Slaves were counted as 3/5 of a person, and that was as a result to get the Constitution ratified. The southern states wanted to count their slaves because they felt that without that, the 2 most populous states in the country, which were New York and Virginia at the time, would have unrepresented or more power because of the representation that's also provided under the census. It wasn't until 100 years later, after the Civil War, that African-American slaves or free men and women were actually counted. In the original census, the 3/5 of a person was shown by the slaveholder's name only, and a tick mark was shown underneath their name. So John Doe, slave owner, I have 1 black man, 35 years old, a hash mark under my name, 1 black woman, 33 years old, hash mark under my name, 1 5-year-old child, hash mark, 1 5-year-old child, female, hash mark. The results of the very first census showed that the population was 3.9 million. But George Washington and Thomas Jefferson both thought that number was off. They thought the number should be over 4 million. And remember, they didn't agree on much, but this they agreed on. And they had been conducting census. This was not the first census in the world. They had been conducting censuses for the British Empire before that time. And it basically just goes to show you that from the very beginning, census numbers have been disputed. They've always been disputed as undercounts, never overcounts. So let's see what this does. The Constitution goes on to say that representatives in Congress, the House of Representatives, should be based upon a population of one representative per every 30,000 residents. Well, that doesn't work. And we found out that that didn't work in 1910. When they did the 1910 census, we came up with the number of 433. As you know now, most of you are in politics or pay attention to this, we have 435 representatives in our Congress. That number came as a result of the 1910 census, which gave us 433, based on that one for every 30,000 representatives with a minimum of one per state. And we added 2 additional representatives when we added the states of New Mexico and Arizona. However, we did not add 2 additional representatives when we went to add Alaska and Hawaii. That 435 number has stayed in effect since the 1910 census. It has not been changed, and it basically has not been changed because Congress doesn't know how to fix it. They don't know who's going to pay for it. How do you change it? So as it is right now, each one of our congressmen and women represent about 700,000 people, not 30,000 on average. So to show that to you, in the population of Wyoming is 578,000. They still get their 1 Congress member, 2 senators. But California's population is almost 40 million. We get 53, but we still get the 2 senators. So that hasn't changed. No one knows how to change it. That's just what it is. So when we did the first census in 1789, we had 65 representatives in the Continental Congress. But as soon as we did that first census, we realized we needed 142. And then again, we stopped at our maximum number of 435. The census does 2 things. That's all it does. It determines how many people we have seated in Congress for each individual state, and it decides who gets the $1.5 trillion federal dollars annually. Now that federal tax money includes big things like defense and foreign aid, but it leaves a whole lot of money left over for the states to divide up. Here are the basics. We get 1 chance every 10 years. That's all we get. It is mandatory that you participate. Mandatory. If you do not, there are fines up to $5,000. Doesn't really happen, but the fine is there if the federal government ever wanted to do it. If you give false answers, you can be fined $10,000 per person. It occurs in all 50 states, in all territories like Puerto Rico, Guam, Virgin Islands, etc. The census day is picked as April 1st, but many of you have already been asked to fill out your census form. I filled out mine already. This is basically a day that everyone knows where they're supposed to be on April 1st and use that as a holding point to say, okay, well, today I'm in Texas, but that's not where I live. I'm coming back to California. I normally would live in California on April 1st. That's where I'm going to live. We started the census on January 21st, where the first count began in 200 remote Alaskan villages. Those Alaskan villages do not have access to phones or internet, and they are actually physically only able to get to them when the ground is frozen. So that's why the census began with actual counters going out and physically counting people in those Alaskan villages. Did you know that the census covers or guides, numbers from the census guides, 316 federal programs? I bet you'd like me to go through that whole list, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to give you a sample and maybe pick some things that, not the big ones necessarily, but maybe some programs that you don't know that that are driven by federal money. Head Start, rural poverty nutrition programs, child abuse, school breakfast and lunch programs, and for children, foster care and adoption, but there's so many more things that fall under these federal programs, under the children's programs. Disabled and the elderly, a lot of us are disabled, a lot of us are elderly. They provide nutrition programs. These numbers drive where the nutrition programs go. Heart disease, stroke prevention, almost all medical research is directly driven by research money that is obtained by census-driven numbers. Elderly care facilities, heart research, affordable housing. Under disabled and elderly, there's so much more that it covers. Under education, Pell Grants, health professional scholarships. Do we need those now? We sure do. If you are a health professional, you can get a scholarship to help pay for your schooling through federally funded, driven money from the Census Department. Local community colleges and university funding. Our local governments need this money. Our education system needs this money that is driven by an accurate, complete count of the census. Trade vocational training. And under education, there is so much more. What would we do without the money that the federal government provides for our national parks and monuments? Local parks, habitat restoration, all funded by dramatically driven money from the census count. Federal cleanup sites, those Superfund projects, census driven. Air pollution control, water pollution control, all of that driven by census money, or census numbers that drive the federal budget. And there's so much more under the environment as well. Housing, Section 8 housing, veterans housing. Veterans sometimes need rehabilitation and modification to their housing. Again, this money is given to these veterans because of census numbers that drive where the money should go. Lead-based paint, again, so many more things that is driven by the census money. The transportation, we all know about our federal highway funds, transportation funds for public, rail and security, homeland security. And again, there are so many more things that the census numbers drive this $1.5 trillion federal budget. But are we ready? It's mostly going to be conducted online. There's actually less money being spent this year than there was in the last two census in 2000 and 2010. The Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, says the preparations for the census are on track, but outside groups have said that the OMB is behind on their awareness programs, again, due to this limited funding. I know myself, I have seen a few ads on TV. I don't do Facebook, so maybe there have been more. These were supposed to start up in January. I have only seen them this month in March. I have not seen anything before that time. I hope that maybe you have. The special targeted messages are special messages that are directed to reach specific groups. Those are respected leaders of our communities that are doing outreach, for example, community events, ethnic newspapers, large events, which probably aren't going to be happening now, but generally there was a large event at Easter in the Central Valley that was largely attended by farm workers. So that's going to be a different group to try to reach now for the Census Department. Church groups reach African American groups, homeless shelters, rural schools, PTAs, city elected officials. Anyone who is a respected member of community is supposed to be delivering these messages. Now that you are all listening to me, you have become deliverers of this message. You are now respected community members, and you need to make sure that people are filling out their forms. The government is hiring 500,000 part-time workers. I believe they are still doing this. I hope that we will hear a little bit about that later on if they're still hiring. Those jobs were from $13 to $32, and you can go to census.gov jobs and sign on if we are still asking for more people to be involved in the census. Well, some states are doing more than others, and you would think that every state would want their fair share of this $1.5 trillion of budget, but some states are doing more than others. There are what is called a complete count committee. Complete count committees are state-sponsored groups that are made up of community leaders, nonprofits, elected officials, as well as people from business, healthcare, education, and their goal is to get out the message to be counted, for everyone to be counted. Well, 26 states are allowing $350 million in their state budgets, in addition to the federal funding, to get out the count. California is spending $187 million of this. And I'm sitting back thinking, $187 million of my taxpayer money? Why is California doing this? Well, this is a one-time expense for California, $187 million. And we estimate that every year for the next 10 years, California is going to receive $115 billion of federal money. So when you look at it that way, my tax dollars towards that $187 million for a one-time expense to get $115 billion for the next 10 years seems like a pretty good investment to me. But 24 states have budgeted little or no money to this effort. 5 states have budgeted zero, and they do not even have complete counties complete count committees in place. Those states are Florida, Texas, Nebraska, South Dakota, and Louisiana. In those states, most of the counts are going to be done by volunteers. This is what's happening in the state of Texas. Texas population is growing at about 1,000 residents a day, but half of those are newborn. 500 are newborn. 30% of those, or 300, are from foreign countries, but it's not Hispanic, it's largely Asian. This was surprising to me when I did my research. The other 20% that are coming into Texas every day are older white people that are moving from the northern snow states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio. They're moving to low tax states like Texas, Florida, Arizona. They're moving there because they're tired of shoveling snow. It's warm. They're moving to the Sun Belt states. What's happening is California is spending about $5 per person. Texas is spending $0. According to the New York Times says there is a political divide between the 24 and the 26 states. 17 of these 24 states are led by Republican and governors and legislatures, and the 26 states that are spending those dollars, only 4 are Republican controlled. The idea of these states pouring money, any state pouring money into the census, is really pretty new. They didn't do it until so much money became available. Remember, reapportionment is also involved when the maps are redrawn in 2021, and they will stay in place for the next 10 years. So the political divide seems to be on how you look at things, whether you want the money or whether you want the representation. That's what the New York Times has found in their research. Here's what an accurate count could mean to that congressional representation. Remember, the census only does 2 things. It decides where the federal money's going and what state is going to get how many representatives in the Congress. An accurate census count would include more people from harder to count groups like Hispanics, African Americans, Asians, and the poor, who tend to vote Democratic. If they don't participate, the population count would skew Republican, so that the political maps would be redrawn by legislatures that are in effect after the election in November, that are in place in 2020. The Texas count is primarily being done by money that is donated from the immigrant groups, philanthropists, the United Way, and volunteers. Texas is on track to gain 3 seats. The state of California is on track to lose 1. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis said that the census is the sole responsibility of the federal government and not the taxpayers of Florida. Florida has the 3rd largest Latino population after California and after Texas. And remember, states did not give money to the federal census until about the 1990 census, when they started putting money in. The rest of the time it was totally federally funded. Here's what we think would happen, is on track to happen after the census. We're looking at Texas gaining 3, Florida gaining 2, and Arizona gaining 1. And I've just told you they don't want to spend money on getting the count. How are they going to gain representatives if they're not counting? Well, these states believe that that 20% of northern whites that are permanently moving into these Sun Belt states, that group of people traditionally fill out forms. They don't fear the federal government. They know this is their civic duty. They think there are going to be enough people that fill out the form for those Texas, Arizona, and Florida to gain those states. Conversely, California is putting in money so that we don't lose more than 2 seats, or pardon me, more than 1 seat, so that we don't end up being 2. There have been estimates that California could lose as many as 3 seats. We don't know. It really depends on the count. We don't know how the count's going to go, because now we have the virus that's even adding into more problems that we have, getting an accurate count. Now let's look at a couple of other issues. Citizenship and race. Do they have an effect on the count? Citizenship is not part of the 2020 census form. And let me put the record straight. In the 230-year history of the Census Bureau has never asked for the citizenship status of every single person in the country. The reality is that the census question, when it was asked, or pardon me, the citizenship question, when it was asked, was directed to small segments of the population. So for example, naturalized foreign-born males age 21 and older, and that information was used to specifically find out how specific groups were assimilating to life in the United States. But we know that any form of the citizenship question has always caused an undercount. In 1950, it was estimated that 5.5 million people were undercount because they were asked simply if they were white or a non-white male. They didn't want to answer the question. They weren't counted. In 1960, the question was finally removed completely, and it has not been back since. Even though there have been challenges in court, it has not come back. The question we do know was asked on the long census, the long form of the census, but that's not mailed to everyone. And the long form census form is now the American Community Service Survey. That American Community Survey form is sent to about 3.5 million annually. It's based on an algorithm, so it's not sent to all of us. And it asks really specific questions. There's 45 to 50 questions on that form. And what it does, so for example, I live in Upland. And if I receive this form, it's going to ask me how many bedrooms do I have in my house? 4. What's my education level? That can vary. My income level. When my house was built, 1965. And what they can do with that information is you could take that information that you received on my specific house, and you could draw a 2-mile radius around my house, and 95% of the houses look exactly like mine. They are 4 bedrooms, they are 2 baths, they have 2 garages, they have comprehension roofs. Education and income level is going to be about the same, because that's how much it costs to live in my neighborhoods. Education levels may vary. Not everyone gets the American Community Survey Act. Like I said, 3.5 million people. You're not supposed to get it any more than 1 time every 5 years. They use it when they want to find out more specific, dial down on the census broad numbers to find out specific information about what specific things are happening in communities, where we can direct money to more accurately get to people that need help. Okay, we know that that citizenship question has been used. The War Powers Act in World War II, under President Roosevelt, the War Powers Act gave the president access to specific information on individuals, which was then given to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, and that was used to intern Japanese Americans on the West Coast. It was also used to surveil German and Italian Americans on the East Coast. This continued past the war until 1949, when it was removed and has never been given access since. In fact, in 1980, a group of FBI agents showed up at the Census Bureau in Denver, Colorado, asking for specific information on individuals. They were denied entrance to the building by the Census Bureau. They challenged it in court. The court said, no, you cannot get this information. That has stayed in effect since then, just like it did this last time. The Supreme Court said, no, the census citizenship question is not on there. The Bureau itself doesn't want to be seen as an enforcement agent, but immigrant groups and communities are still very suspicious. Census Bureau research showed in 2018 that this is really widespread. 35% of Asians, 34% of African Americans, 32% of Latinos fear that the information gathered on the census form will be shared with other organizations illegally. In fact, when you look at the general population in the United States right now, 1 in 4 residents have a general mistrust of the government. That alone makes it very, very difficult to get accurate numbers for the census count when you have 1 in 4 mistrust the government. Now let's take a look further at race and ethnicity. There are only 6 classifications of race on the census form. However, people think race and ethnicity are interchangeable terms, but the Census Department does not. The Census Bureau defines race as a person's self-identification with more than one or more social groups. An individual can report as white, Black, African American, Asian. There is a subcategory of Asian that would say Chinese, Korean, Cambodian, etc. American Indian, Native American, and yes, it does actually say American Indian, not Native American. Under that category, there's a choice that you can make for a tribe that you associate with or relate to. Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander or some other race. That's it. Only 6 classifications on the census form. They are the same classifications that have been used since 1987. Now, there was Census Department research from 2008 all the way up to 2018 when the final questions were put on the census form by the Department of Commerce. That information or that research showed that if you listed more groups under the race question, you would have a more accurate count and more accurate participation in the census. If people were specifically want to see their own group listed, that makes them feel like money is being spent on their group. So for example, Middle Eastern or North African, Central American. There is a Hispanic group that is shown, but it's not a race. It is shown on question number 6, and under that question, it is a separate question. And you answer that question, and if you are Hispanic and you choose, and you have subcategories, again there you have Guatemalan, Chicano, Mexican, Spanish, etc. There are several choices, but once you choose a category under category question number 6, you are required to pick a race under the next question, so you are to choose one of those 6 choices. So what happens as a result of that is, as of 2010, some other race was the 3rd most chosen race after white or African American. I recently did my 23andMe. I now qualify under 3 different races that are shown there. So I have chosen to put some other race as my selection this year. My point in bringing this up is if all the information is being gathered under some other race, perhaps you are not getting accurate information under race, and maybe that question should be looked at again by 2030. Who is hard to count? I'm not. I'm going to fill out the form. I already filled out my form, but the Census Department knows that there are a lot of groups and individuals that are hard to count. So who are they? The Census Department has determined that they are people that are hard to locate, hard to contact, hard to persuade, and hard to interview. There are actually 18 categories under this, and some of them are surprising. A complex household. A complex household is like a blended family. So if you're a grandparent who is raising your grandchild, who counts? Do you count them or do their parents count them? Well, I'm happy to say that when you look at your internet census form, it does explain that to you, so it's much easier for you to understand whether you're supposed to count them or their parents are supposed to count them. Cultural and linguistic minorities. There are cultural differences on how these questions appear to different cultural groups. For example, Japanese Americans have a high propensity to answer because they think these are legitimate questions. Cambodian Americans, also an Asian group, does not feel that this is important to answer. These types of breakdowns are hard to count, and the Census Department needs to look at those, and they know that they are hard to count and make adjustments when they go out to these areas and try to get these counts. LGBTQ communities. The Census Bureau asks for your address, and it does now have a question that includes, instead of just your spouse, it does say that spouse of the same sex. That's a new question that's been added to the census form. Well, maybe LGBTQ persons are worried that their address is out there and that they can be identified. So they are a hard to count group as well. Low income, we know that. They don't have access. Homeless, well, this week my tent is on 4th Street, but maybe on April 1st, I might be on 6th Street. They have special groups that will go out and count these types of communities. Groups that are less likely to have internet service. Those groups are probably going to receive the long form in the mail. Persons residing in person, difficult for a census worker to gain access to. And this was something that surprised me. I'd not thought about this, but look at all of us 55 plus that live in gated communities. If I am one of the 4 people who chooses not to answer my form and an actual person has to come out and try to identify me to get that information, if they can't get past the gate or they can't get past my doorman, they're never going to get to me. So that's another group that is hard to count. People who don't live in traditional housing, on reservations or off the grid, hard to count. Again, we've talked about people who distrust the government. Some of the questions on the census form are a little bit confusing. So think if you have a mental or physical disability. People without high school diplomas, they already feel that they don't amount to anything or aren't supposed to be counted. Racial, ethnic minorities, we talked about them being hard to count. Renters don't think that they're supposed to be counted because they really don't think that the government's looking for them. They think it's only people who actually own houses. That's not true. Undocumented and recent immigrants, green card holders. You're here as a permanent a citizen of a different country, but you hold a green card. If you are a person in this country permanently, not a tourist or not someone here on business for 1 week, you are to be counted. But people with green cards don't think they are, or the undocumented are afraid to. Young children, it's estimated we lost 10% of the children under the age of 5 in the 2010 census. And also parents don't think their children under the age of 18 need to be counted. They don't have an income. Who cares about them? I'm not supposed to count them. I'm the wage earner. I'm the parent. I'm the only person supposed to be counted. Hard to count to get accurate information on people under the age of 18. Mobile young people. My daughter goes in and out of the state because of her job all the time. She has to pick one location that she lives at most of the time to be counted. College students, people that live in dorms, people that are in prison, people that are in homeless camps, people that are in the hospital, they will be counted by special enumerators. People with limited English proficiency, it's going to be hard to get accurate counts on them. Well, it's also hard to find out where they are located. And no, it is not Los Angeles. Detroit has 86% of the people that live in Detroit have the highest rate of being in a hard to locate community. That is because there are tens of thousands of vacant houses, there's sparse internet service, there is high poverty, and there is a high mistrust of government. 86 out of 100 people in Detroit are going to be hard to count. The Rust Belt and the Sun Belt, where we live, those areas exist as well. In California, the 2 top areas that have the hard to count areas are this area of Los Angeles and Fresno. 43% of us out of 100 are in hard to count areas. In contrast to that, areas that have large, older white populations don't have that problem. Vermont, Massachusetts, Virginia, only 5% are going to be in hard count areas. And again, that is because generally older white Americans or older white residents trust the government and are going to feel that this is a legitimate thing that they need to fill out. California has 15 hard to count geographical areas. And if you look at the numbers between the geographical area and one of those 18 actual criterias or categories, even all of us in California, 72 out of 100 of us could fall into areas that would be hard to count or not counted at all. Well, what is the Census Department doing about it? First of all, let me tell you, the census form is easy. It took me 8 minutes to fill out the form online yesterday between my husband and I. 8 minutes, there's only 9 questions. There's an additional 7 questions for other members of the household. It is in 13 languages. If you call or request it, if you click on it, if you get it, you can click on it in 13 different languages immediately, so it can change. If you call the census because you don't see your 13 languages there is support for up to 59 communities and languages that we feel need support. I say if we can support them in 59 different languages, why can't we support 59 different races? Because we actually attribute ethnicity and race as the same thing. It might make the numbers more accurate. We'll see what happens in 2030. The Census Department actually created hard to count maps. You can actually go into census.gov, you can click on your own address, and you can see if you are considered to be in one of these hard to count areas on these maps. California actually went a little bit further because California created its own map with a couple more variables because we want our count to be accurate. We're spending the money to get our count accurate. Response to the census can be done in 3 ways. You can do it by internet, by phone, or on paper. Again, we are trying to get the message out through these respected community leaders, which all of you now have become a respected community leader. And I want you to ask your families and friends, did you get it? Did you do it? Just tell me you did and I'll leave you alone. And if they say, well, I haven't done it yet, hey, you know what? I'm going to check back with you in 2 days to make sure you did fill it out. It's important. Use of digital tools, you will be, if you're not already seeing messages on Facebook. I know I've seen, like I said, more messages on the TV on my commercial time. But city websites, cities are doing a good job of getting information. School websites, PTAs, Claremont School District, which is one that I actually pay attention to because I'm so involved in Claremont for a lot of things that I do between Claremont and Upland. Claremont has been regularly sending papers home with their seniors. They've also been putting it up on their website. Chamber of Commerce, they want to participate because it brings money to their cities. It brings jobs to their cities. It brings highway funds. It brings park funds. So the city Chamber of Commerce care about this too. They want help. They want people to count. Public events, you're going to see this at Little League, soccer. Well, we would have had national sporting events, but maybe we will. Dodger games, Angel games, TV. Just tell everyone you know how to complete, or tell them it's easy, complete the form, only 9 questions. The very first census only had 6 questions. So in 230 years, we've only gone up 3 more questions. So we're in a good shape. Now I'm going to talk to you about what everyone is worried about. Whoops, pardon me. Let me go forward again. Here we go. What about my safety and security and my privacy? First of all employees that work for the Census Bureau undergo an extensive background check. But in addition to that, all employees are required to take a non-disclosure oath and are sworn for life to protect the information that could identify an individual. They can be fined up to $250,000 and spend 5 years in federal prison if they violate this. This means information that can lead back to a particular individual. Under census law, under government law, the Census Bureau cannot report personal information to any government agency, federal, state, local. not welfare, not immigration and customs, not the Internal Revenue Service, not courts, not the police, not the military. If an individual does this, an individual is subject to a $5,000 fine. So if my neighbor comes over and says, oh, Cindy, I filled out my form and I'm worried because I'm undocumented, and I run down to ICE, I can go to jail for that. I can go to jail for that. The Census Bureau, unlike what most people think, the Census Bureau does not retain a database that has your address or your personal information on it. What the Census Bureau does is create a statistical platform. So it says Cindy Reul is a female. So it says one female, age 70 years old, at zip code 91784. So it puts that information in a statistical platform and uses it to come up with these census numbers. So why am I having to fill out my name? And why am I having to put my address on it? Well, that information is immediately sent over to the National Archives. After the statistical information is taken out by the census, it's sent over to the National Archives, and it is not released for 72 years. So for example, when you want to search your ancestry, the last ancestry information, when you go on to find my roots and they're looking at census data, they cannot go back or get information from 1950 census data, 1960, 70, 80, 90, etc. The last information that was released was from the 1940 census. After this census, we will probably have a drop of the 1950 census. After we've gone, that's 72 years. So for example, I can go back and search my ancestry all the way back to the very first census of 1780. I think that was right, 1780. But if I'm an African American, my name was not listed until after the Civil War. An African American cannot search their name through the National Archives and get their ancestry up until 1870, because that's the first time their names were listed instead of just a tick mark under their slave owner's name. So they can go back to 1870, I can go all the way back and search mine. The Census Bureau itself will never ask for your Social Security number, your mother's maiden name, any money, any donations, any credit card, or any bank information. If this happens, you are being scammed. Turn off your computer, shut your phone off, don't slam the door, try to get as much information so you can report it to census.gov so they know who is out there doing this type of information or trying to get this information from you. And I know we're all worried about that, and there has been some misinformation campaigns going around. Well, what about my own computer? How do I know my computer's safe? What about that information that I'm putting in the Census Bureau that I did yesterday? What happened to that? Well, here's what it is. Double encrypted. What double encrypted means in easy language is, I put in everything, I hit that send button, and it leaves my computer and it's automatically changed into nonsensical numbers, digits, and letters, and it flies through the air, and before it gets at the Census Bureau computer, one more time, all those already nonsensical numbers, letters, and digits are converted one more time into more nonsensical numbers, digits, and letters. That's called double encryption. It's encrypted at my end, it's encrypted at the Census Bureau. Double encryption is considered safe. It is considered the most safe, and we are also dealing with big data experts to tell us what to do. So please don't worry about doing this on your computer system. It is much safer to do it on your computer system than to do it by hand and mail it in, whereas a third party has to figure out what you have done. The same thing will happen if you go to a library. The libraries will have dedicated computers. If they open again, my library is closed, but they will have dedicated computer systems for people that don't have computer access to fill out their census form. Those computers will have the most up-to-date cybersecurity on them. Same as areas where people publicly use their computers, like Starbucks, when people were sitting at Starbucks. They also will be, they know they are large groups, they have internet access. They are also required by the federal government to have the most up-to-date cyber security, and big data is providing large areas with this information. So you are going to be safe if you use a computer at the library or at Starbucks. They have that encryption in there, and they are updating it constantly. What you can do, make sure that when you go to a website, that you are not being misdirected to any other website than census.gov. Don't get over to a census.org, census.net, census.com, any other one. You are being misdirected, and that information is not secure. The only place you need to go is actually my2020census.gov. If you have questions, go to www.census.gov. That's where 95% of this information that I'm giving you today all came from. Right on that computer system. It's fantastic. Anything that you need to know, and probably many more things you don't want to know, are in www.census.gov. If you find that you are being directed to a .org, a .net, or a .com, make sure and write down that HTTPS or HTTP address and go to census.gov and report it to them so that they know people are being misdirected. You need to have your browsers and operating systems updated. If you don't know how to do it, ask your children or grandchildren. They will do it for you. Your browser is like Google or Bing or one of those. Your operating system is like ISO or Android or whatever they're using now on that. I have a Mac, so I'm not familiar with exactly what they're all called. Oh, I guess it would be Microsoft probably. Make sure that those are updated. And I used to tell my kids, whenever they did anything, just use your common sense, and you have the availability to fact check things. So if you don't think something's right that you're hearing, or fact check it, go to factcheck.gov or factcheck.org and ask and find out, and you'll be able to get information. Don't fill out any information except for census.gov. Well, what happens if I get that knock on the door and a census employee contacts me? First of all, you're not going to get a blind knock on the door. The Census Department is not going to come out to see you without sending you something by mail of an impending visit, not a phone call, not an email, by mail. They're going to send you a little card that says, hey, I'm coming out because you answered a question confusing, or I didn't get your information back, or whatever reason. They're going to wear a badge. They're going to wear a badge that has a watermark on it. It has their picture on it. It also has their employee number on it. And you can go to www.census.gov and put that number in, and a picture of that employee is going to come up. So before you open your door, you can say, oh yeah, that does look like Joe, and it does say Joe's the right guy that's coming here. So be smart about it. We know that during the months of the summer months, that's when those enumerators are going to be out in your neighborhoods. So you need to take that extra precaution if someone is knocking on your door, because that's the chance where people that are scammers can be knocking on your door saying that they are census employees. But again, you're going to be notified. Hold on to that little piece of paper. That employee will have that paper. They're going to show you a copy of it. Make them show you a copy of it. Also, they're going to be carrying a device. It's like an iPad. It's not really an iPad. It kind of looks like a phone more. Well, make them, if they're already signed in, make them sign out and watch them sign in, because it takes a double encryption for them to come and sign in. Double encryption means a biometric, their eyeball, their fingerprint. Check that they're doing that and that they're actually entering a password. That way you can be sure, okay, this is double encryption. It's not someone that's signed into a malware site or a wrong site. I can trust them, they're doing this. In addition to that, the Census Department has decided that if somebody washes their equipment accidentally, or it gets lost, or it gets stolen, all the information on that device that the census employee has can be wiped clean. It can be wiped clean off-site. And again, they're all going to have state-of-the-art malware protection. They're going to be searching this and updating it as needed. And the more information you can provide to them, if you have been misdirected to something or if you think something is wrong, the better. And finally, on privacy, I want you to look out for disinformation campaigns. Disinformation campaigns are already out there. They're out there on email and Facebook and even snail mail. Be especially aware of those scammers that'll call on you in person, but they may even be using snail mail and email. And again, if you think you have seen an untrue ad, please report it. Google and Facebook have already said they're going to take down any ads that encourage non-participation or doubt about cybersecurity issues. As we all know, they're doing the best they can, but they're being inundated. And now we have the coronavirus on top of that. So they're doing the best thing that they can. They're trying. That's at least something that they did not do during the election of 2016. They learned a lot. We are trying to do the best we can. And remember, just be safe, be smart, and think before you do. And you're probably not going to have any problem with any kind of privacy issues. I had to add this just, well, 2 weeks ago when this finally came up. And I didn't find much information because this is a new thing, the coronavirus. So I went back to the last pandemic, which was the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, and what the 2020 census did about it. What they did in 1920 is they put in a 5-month delay on the count. And remember, back then they didn't have computers. They were physically doing this, or people were mailing it in. So it was a different world then. So a lot has changed. With it being online, we don't have to touch documents. We don't have to open our doors to anyone. If we do it online, we will be safe. More people that participate online saves the census employees' health, saves our community's health. The CDC and the Census Bureau are working together. They just announced, I think yesterday or the day before, that they are going to delay some of these in-person counts that they were planning on doing at college dormitories, at the homeless camps. It's an hour-to-hour, day-to-day thing. We know it just got much harder to get an accurate count. But what we do know is that the Census Bureau has dealt with these things before, maybe not on this magnitude. We know in 1918 it was huge, but we haven't done it in our lifetimes. But think about things that always happen. 2 weeks ago, we had tornadoes in Tennessee. We're looking at tornadoes going through in the next couple of days in the southeastern part of our country. They know that people they were going to send documents through with their census numbers on them have been lost to those people that lost their houses. They're making arrangements to figure out how they can count them. They will do the best they can. We need to help them in any way that we can. We can't help and change Mother Nature. We can change misinformation, and I hope all of us will pay attention to that. Okay, let's take a deep breath. We're finally to California stuff. I bet you thought I'd never get here. I like to do a lot of research. It's obvious. I like to know about things. Here's what we're looking at in California, what we think will happen. We think that an undercount will deprive California of $2,000 per person. That's an estimate, but it's not for 1 year. It is for $2,000 per person for 10 years. That means a family of 5 that we don't count, $100,000 is going to be lost to California's budget and California programs. 1/3 of California budget comes from federally funded dollars. Like I said, we think we get about $115 annually from census-driven numbers. The largest census-driven program in California, and actually nationwide, is the Medicare and Medi-Cal, and it is about $44 billion to the state of California annually. Our education, we receive 9% of our education money from federal dollars. Most of it comes from state and property taxes, but the federal government still wants to give us $14 billion a year. We can't afford to lose $1 of that money. We've got to make sure people are counted. Federal highway funds, most of that money, again, in California, comes from California gas tax, but the feds want to give us $6 billion every single year. We know what California roads look like. We need every dollar of that. We need to be counted in California. Let's look at specifics. The two counties that my league covers is San Bernardino County, the largest county in the United States, and Los Angeles County, the most populous county. So let's take a side-by-side look at those. Population is LA County's 10 million, 2 million in San Bernardino County. But look at the land area. And the land area of LA County is 4,000 miles. We're going to kind of count 10 million people in 4,000 miles. That's hard. Look at San Bernardino. We're only looking at 2 million people, but we've got them spread out over 20,000 square miles. Also hard to count. California's population of LA County count will be about 2,400 per square mile, 100 people per square mile in San Bernardino. Both of those numbers are hard and difficult to count, either by volume or by density. The median income is not too different between the counties, but if I'm living in San Bernardino County, $4,000 might mean an awful lot to me if that's the difference. Language other than English, this is English that is spoken at home when you come home from work. Someone speaks a different language in your household. 57% of LA County residents speak a different language than English at home, 42% in San Bernardino County. High school ed, graduates, that's about the same for our counties, but look at the difference between college degrees. 32% in LA County have a bachelor's degree or above. That goes down to only 20% in San Bernardino County. There's a couple of things that aren't on this chart. The poverty rates for both of our counties, that's about the same. The poverty rate's about 15% for LA and San Bernardino County. Housing units. In Los Angeles County, there are 3.5 million housing units to count those 10 million people. In San Bernardino County, there's 726,000 to count over 20,000 square miles. It is difficult for these two counties to get this information accurately. But what does it mean to us in terms of money? Here's what it means. Title I funds, that's education funds. 586 million, 146 million in San Bernardino. Community block grants, that's where your cities care about. That's what fixes your roads, gives you parks, gets jobs. 109 million a year, 19 million in San Bernardino County. Workplace development, that's unemployment, that's education, that's retraining, anything that is job driven. An employer wants to put a job here, that's where it comes from. Workplace development, LA County, 68 million annually, San Bernardino, 16 million. We can't afford to lose $1 of this. Accurate
Cindy,
count matters. Yes?
Cindy, we're way over time.
Okay.
So this is what we're going to do. We are going to pause this for now. We do have some questions that came in over the call, so I'm going to save those for later. For now, I wanted to give a chance for those of you that came in to kind of give legislative updates to do so. So if you're here for that purpose, do me a favor and just kind of comment in the chat so I make sure I don't miss you. So I'm going to start with, I think I'll start with Renee, because I know that she mentioned out here. Renee, I'm going to unmute you. Feel free to give us your update.
Hi, I am from the United States Census Bureau, and I really appreciate Cindy. She did a very informative presentation, a lot of information, and it is really accurate and good information. And it's like she had said, that all of you from the chamber are business leaders, employees, members of your organizations, count you and rely on you, and they trust you. So please, it's just, the mailing invitations have already been mailed. Everyone has received them. It's easy. You can just go online and do it in 10 to 15 minutes. And like Cindy said, if there's going to be households that, if there's like, I don't want to go through the questions. I will let Cindy do it as well, but you can do the questionnaire without the invitation ID number. There is an option. If you go online, you can do it. So it is available for everyone else. in terms of the United States Census Bureau, we are live. We're working hard. As a partnership specialist, I am around and we're doing whatever we can. We are shifting gears in terms of outreach. So we are, we're looking in a lot of online platforms to get the word out. And so we all just want to ask you that we all participate together. Yes, there has been a halt in operations and training, and as well as in recruitment. But partnership specialists are all working around the clock to make sure that the word is out. And so we're really just, working together. We're working with our school districts and whatever we can to make sure that the census operation, it's more important than ever before that we get an accurate count, because we're going to be leading a lot of the funding coming forward.
Okay, thanks, Renee. Both Cindy and Renee, if you could do me a favor, just leave your contact information in the chat box in case anybody wants to get a hold of you. We'll make sure we share this afterwards. Next up, I have Stephanie Wade is here representing Congressman Cisneros with a brief announcement. Stephanie?
The first thing I wanted to say is that, the congressman in particular really appreciates updates like this and the opportunity to be smart and socially distant, but keep life as normal. I mean, life doesn't stop, and any economic or social activity we can do virtually and distance-wise are all to the good. So we really appreciated this. Our office has been underscoring the importance of the census and messaging on that at all our town halls and all our events. So thank you very much for the presentation. And then other than that, just as an update, I will tell you that, we're hard at work. Congress has been passing legislation quite rapidly, and including through some extraordinary measures, passing the Senate bill the other day through Congress was done pro forma, and that's because there was unanimous consent that Veterans GI Bill legislation, that's Senate Bill 3503, needed to pass. And in fact, there was a complementary bill in the House. It sailed through, and that's thanks to a real bipartisan spirit that I think isn't just in Washington, but across the country. So I wanted to share that news, and then let folks know that, we're reaching out to state government. We're particularly interested in, I had a very good call today with Councilman Marquez, and we're concerned about the role of religious institutions playing right now at the moment, and making sure they have an opportunity to do what's right, because they're really an essential service for us at a time like this more than anything. Other than that, I'm prepared to take questions on the chat line, and know that our office, by the way, is now closed even for appointments. We're not taking any appointments, but we are all available, and I'll make sure I post to everyone my cell phone number so that you can reach our office anytime you have need. That's all I got. But fantastic. Thank you again for hosting both this and the breakfast meeting you hosted on Zoom 2 days ago. It's fantastic.
Good. And I think we're going to be doing something similar to that every Tuesday from 8:30 to 9:30. So I'll be putting information about that out in the near future. So
please, and I just encourage everybody to stay safe and prudent, but not scared. We're Americans. We're gonna do well in this. And when you have things that need to get fixed, let us know, and we're going to move heaven and earth to do whatever the federal government can do.
Thank you very much. I think we have Todd from Air Quality Management Control. Todd?
Howdy, Todd from the AQMD. Thank you for hosting this. The census is actually really important to the Air District and getting funds from the feds, from the state. It's also a great way that we figure out how many people live in an area that is affected by certain types of air pollution. So fill those things out. It helps us and it helps you. So neat stuff in Chino that's important is there's a whole bunch of electric trucks coming to your town. You have about 9 warehouses in Chino under the NFI, National Freight Industries, and they're running electric trucks, electric Freightliners and EV Cascadias. We also have Volvo electric semis in Chino now, and that would be a great Chino champion story. It's also good for our local freight haulers, and that is, I sent the links to Zeb, definitely cutting edge stuff. next time you're driving on the 10 between Haven and Milliken, look on the south side of the 10 at Penske, and you can see the big electric semi-truck chargers right there on the side of the freeway, right by the TA truck stop. And then last, I'll say that the Air District is closed right now, but we are open for our small business assistance. Any of the permit needs that you have, we are doing that essentially online and virtually. If you need any assistance with that, our small business assistance office is open, and we will help out with those issues. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And is there anybody else that I'm missing? If you are, wave your hand or type in the comment box. Cindy, I'm sorry if I felt like I cut you off there. I just wanted to make sure that we had those legislative updates to come in, but we still have some time at the end for those questions. And if you want to run through some last minute stuff, we can do that as well. So sorry for cutting you off there, but I just want to make sure we got that in before, because I know that everybody's kind of busy and running around like crazy in the last few weeks. And I want to make sure.
It's a tense time, and the census is a very normal thing. So it's kind of nice to talk about normalcy, and that's what this is. The census really drives every quality of life program that you can imagine. So we got to get it out. We got to do it. It's not going away. We get one chance every 10 years. That's it. And
yeah,
I do thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. So was there anything that, sorry for cutting you off, did you want to cover the last couple of bits? I just wasn't sure how long you were going after we were chatting, so I didn't want to.
I told you I'm a talker. This is all the timeline. Some of these things have changed a little bit, like the April 1st dates, now that the Census Bureau, and Renee answered those questions. One question I do have for Renee, if you can hear me. Renee, are you still trying to take any applications for employees that want to join when we get ramped up again, or has the employment time ended?
So employment has ended. Okay. That operation was ended on February, last week of February, but that's because all of the recruitings that we were doing, now they're all becoming customer relation representatives. And that means that, and this operation has been put on hold, was the questionnaire assistance centers. Because now the census is going online and you can virtually do it, we were actually looking forward to coming to events throughout the cities and through our complete count committees, and actually being there with our iPads. And so, if suppose like we were planning, like a school district was having an open house, then we would be there, and we were trying to reach the hard to count population. In 2010, we missed about 1 million children. So we don't want that to happen again in 2020. And so we were really planning to go to those open houses in schools and, bring our iPads. And that's where the recruitment was. If enumeration, it was going to be side by side with enumeration and the CRRs. But recruitment right now, they are still going through a lot of background checks. So anyone does want to go ahead and apply, they should go online and be able to do so. But it's not like they're actively looking for employment right now.
Thank you, Renee. That's what I thought had happened, that they stopped employment at the end of February, but I wasn't sure. So I wanted to see if anything had changed now that all of this has changed.
Okay. And if you don't mind, I do see that I saw a question regarding divorced parents and children for them. And
let me go through and ask those questions, so then we can both answer those.
Okay.
Cindy, did you cover everything you needed to cover?
The only thing that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is, by law, the Census Bureau is required to deliver the apportionment information to Congress and to the President in December of 2020. So that's when the information gets to those state legislatures and to the President to decide how to redraw those maps in 2021.
Okay, great. So here we have a couple of questions. We have about 10 minutes, and we're going to try to end it right at 1 o'clock. So here are the questions that came through. Once money came to the various programs, are there specific mandates as to how it is to be appropriated? For example, are monies that go to education mandated for a specific educational curriculum, or can it be spent on infrastructure or whatever administrators decide?
Renee, you want to take that? I can probably answer that if you want me to.
Go ahead.
All right, there's 316 federally mandated programs that are directly affected by the census. And depending on where the money is allocated to what program, that program will have its own parameters that say how the money is to be spent. And once that money goes to the states and distributed back out to the counties have reporting information that goes back to the states to make sure that they're in compliance, and back to the federal government from the state governments. You can add to that, Renee, if I'm incorrect.
No, that's perfectly answered well. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, good. And these questions are all from Jim. So if any of you else are listening and have some questions, feel free to include them in the chat. So how does the census count of homeless help that demographic specifically?
Renee, I know that's changed, so you can go for that one.
So there was going to be group quarters operations for the homeless, for the college count has changed, and that operation has been put on halt because of the current situation that we have. It's not to be said that they will be counted. It was actually supposed to be been counted on March 30th to the April 1st, but that has been postponed. And as things get better, we will get a date. But group operations has been put on hold as of now.
Okay, good to know. Jim also says he filled out the AM community survey. If he also fills out the census, will the info be counted twice, or is it integrated?
They're two different informations. What the American survey form dials down and distributes money in more specific areas than the census. He's not being counted double. The census is a separate group than the American Community Survey. It's a separate form. He's not going to be counted twice. Correct, Renee?
Yeah.
Okay, and then here's a one about the divorced parents. How does the census count children who reside in dual households of divorced parents?
It goes by whichever, and this is actually when you go online, you can see this information described on how you're properly supposed to do this under that category. The child is counted with the parent that they spend most of their time with. And you can tell me if that's incorrect. If it's a 50-50, where they're living on April 1st.
Exactly. Yeah.
Use that April 1st date as the location date for people to respond. So like if I was traveling in Northern California, but 90% of the time I live in Upland, they want to know where I am supposed to be on April 1st. That's what I use.
And that's correct. Like April 1st is considered Census Day, which is our key reference point. It's not to say that we can do the questionnaire before or after, but we make April 1st our Census Day just as a point of reference.
Yes.
Where we count everyone in all households on April 1st.
Okay. Fantastic. I really appreciate Cindy. Thank you so much for coming in to share your insights with us about this and telling our members how to come to their census. Renee, thank you for participating as well. Those of you that provided legislative updates, I want to thank you for doing that also. Let me give you a few updates from our chamber, just to kind of tell you a few things that we're working on. So number one is we've put together a resource guide dealing with the coronavirus. So we're trying to update that in real time with information that can be available and applicable to businesses in the Chino Valley. So we are going to be doing another update today. We'll send it out via our email list. So if you haven't signed up for that, make sure you do. We'll also be sending out through social media and those other avenues as well. It's also on our website. So it's ChinoValleyChamber.com/COVID-19-update. And so you can find it there. The other thing is we're encouraging all of our businesses to fill out a survey. We've given the survey to Congressman Cisneros' office, so they're using that survey to compile information, to also reach out to businesses to see how they can be of assistance, and even use that for to identify opportunities where the federal government can come in and help businesses in our area. And so if you haven't done that, make sure you do. We've also opened that up to the other legislative offices in town just so that they know how that's impacting our businesses. So that is also on our website. And as I try to send that out in every email we send out. So if you get a chance and you're a business owner in the Chino Valley, make sure you fill that out with the challenges that you're facing as a result of the coronavirus. Our upcoming events. So now we're not meeting in person anymore. We're going to be doing these Zoom conferences from here for the foreseeable future. So next week, I'm going to be working like a Chino Valley Leaders Roundtable. So it'll be an update just on coronavirus, the newest things, things are happening on an hour-by-hour basis. So we, just like last night, the governor made an announcement that we're supposed to be staying at home. So those are all sorts of things that we want to make sure that our businesses are updated. And then I was getting calls all morning from different businesses wondering if it applied to them or if it didn't apply to them and how does that work. So that's the type of information that we're going to try to share on those Tuesday updates. So every Tuesday, the plan will be to do it from 8:30 to 9:30. So I'll be sending it out to our legislators and local community leaders to participate in that. This is going to be live on our, I shouldn't say live, this will be recorded. It is recorded. We're going to post it on our YouTube page. It just takes a while for me to, a couple hours to upload it. So give me a few hours and this will be uploaded onto our YouTube page so you can watch this. You can share this with your audience or your family and friends or whoever you feel like might be interested, other business owners. So Tuesday, we're going to do that leadership roundtable. Wednesday, we're going to go back to our normal business at breakfast. We'll do a meeting format just like this, so we have an opportunity to interact with each other. So that'll be Wednesday from 7:45 to 9. So currently, those are the two things we have planned coming next week, and I'm pretty sure we have somebody from the Make-A-Wish Foundation that will be talking about how you can grant wishes. With that, I think we're going to end it there. I'm going to leave the chat box open, so I'm going to unmute everybody so we can have a dialogue or discussion afterwards, and then I'll just close it once everybody leaves. So feel free to stick around and chat with each other. I encourage you all to network with each other online, so we're all participating in this avenue together. In the chat box, feel free to include your name, your email address, how to contact you if you're active on social media. You can share those social media sites too. I really want to encourage us to network during this time while we can't do it in person. So feel free to do it there. Let me do the unmute button and then we can all chat and call it a day. Thank you for participating and thank you all for your, and thank you, Cindy, for your presentation today.
Thank you for the invite and thank everyone for participating too. I'm thrilled that I got to get this message out. Thank you very much.